As investigations develop, we followed the evidence and statements made. The steps I took was...
These police officers, they're worse than mafiosos. Just point the finger. It's that classic Spider-Man meme. You know, they all point the finger at each other.
For familiarity's sake, do you recognize these two bags that you brought to court with you yesterday?
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Buckle Up, It's the Law. This is part 2 of Yuri Bukhenik's cross-examination by none other than Alan Jackson in the first Karen Read murder trial from June of 2024. Last we left him on a cliffhanger. He was about to answer if he went inside 34 Fairview, the house where the alleged murder has occurred according to all prevailing theories, since Karen Read could not have possibly hit him with her car. Let's see what Mr. Bukhenik says.
What steps did you take, sir, in those moments, to determine whether someone in the house at 34 Fairview may have been involved in that physical altercation that you suspected at the time?
As investigations develop, we followed the evidence and statements made. The steps I took was Trooper Proctor and I proceeded to an eyewitness who was also present at the scene when the victim was discovered and interviewed Ms. McCabe.
And prior to interviewing Ms. McCabe, by the way, that was at Ms. McCabe's home, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Even though you believe that there may have been a physical altercation, you didn't ask anybody to come down to the station. Is that right? Any of the witnesses?
That's correct.
And you did not seek to actually go to the physical location of 34 Fairview in those next few hours?
That's correct.
Or the next few days, correct?
Not myself, no.
Okay.
Suspicious.
As a matter of fact, Trooper Proctor did not either, did he?
No, he did not.
You didn't secure the interior of the house as a potential crime scene. You certainly know how to do that, right?
That's a cop-out question. Do you want me to answer whether I did it or whether I know how to do it?
Well, I'll ask the question. If you can answer it, please answer it.
Okay.
Can you answer that question?
I can answer that question.
Why don't you answer both of them then?
First portion is we did not secure the home as a crime scene. And the second portion, yes, I do know how to do that.
And you didn't, as a Massachusetts State Police official, you didn't secure the outside as a crime scene either, did you?
I did not, no.
To your knowledge, nobody else from Massachusetts State Police ever did either, did they?
Yes, they did.
How was that done and when?
When members of our office and the CERT team responded to that location and secured the front yard grass area and processed it.
That was at 5:45, 6 o'clock that night on the 29th?
I believe it was earlier, but I was not present, so I can't testify to the time.
So you don't know personally what they did to quote unquote secure or not secure the crime scene. You know they searched it, but in terms of securing it as a crime scene, you don't have personal knowledge to that.
I was not present.
Okay. You never took any photos of the interior of the house, correct?
I did not know.
You never caused CSSS to go inside the house and process that house as a potential crime scene, correct?
I did not, no.
That's huge.
No forensic criminalists
Why are they
at your
protecting
direction
them?
ever went into 34 Fairview?
No, they did not.
And the people that you interviewed on January 29th, you already mentioned Ms. McCabe. The other people were her husband, Matt McCabe, correct?
That's correct.
And her brother-in-law, Brian Albert. Is that right?
That is correct.
And all three of them were interviewed where?
They were interviewed at the McCabe residence.
Now, yesterday when you testified, did you indicate that Brian Albert was not present in the home when you interviewed Matt McCabe and Jennifer McCabe?
They were not. He was not present in the dining room when we were interviewing each individual separately.
So if all three of them testified that he arrived before you arrived, they would all be wrong.
I did not see him in the home when we arrived. No.
I want to switch gears real quick to a couple of the physical items that you testified about yesterday, specifically the gray shirt or the gray hoodie and the orange shirt. You and Trooper Proctor collected both of those items you indicated from the floor of the hospital at Good Samaritan, correct?
That's correct.
You testified that you and Trooper Proctor immediately bagged both of those items. They were sort of sopping wet, I think you said.
That's correct.
You indicated that the bags were so wet that you had to take the items back out of the bags and then lay them out on, I think you said, butcher paper. Is that right?
The items were soaked and wet. They were bagged, double bagged, to prevent leakage of physiological fluids and the moisture coming off of it. And then once they were transported to the office, they were laid out on butcher paper in order to dry naturally.
So you went from Good Samaritan directly to Dighton, correct?
That is correct.
And then you went from Dighton directly to the Canton Police Department, after which you had seized the vehicle, correct? And the phone.
We seized the phone in the vehicle in Dighton and then followed the tow truck straight to the Canton Police Department.
So at some point, if you had received or gathered the wet clothing at Good Sam, went from Good Sam to Dighton Canton PD, at what point that evening did you finally get those items of clothing out and laid out to dry?
It was late that night, around 10 or so.
So where were the items in the meantime?
They were stored in the back passenger compartment of my pickup truck.
In those double bags?
Correct.
Who took control of the items to then lay them out late that night at the office?
I do not recall.
Is that you or Trooper Proctor?
I don't recall. I don't remember.
At some point, obviously, it was getting late. You'd been on duty for a long time that day. You went home at some point, correct?
At some point, yes.
Did you wait for those clothes to dry before you went home, or did you leave that in Trooper Proctor's hands?
No, once they were laid out in the processing area in the office, we went home.
Okay. Who would have controlled those items of evidence when you left?
Well, they're under lock and key within the secure area of the district attorney's office, so they're secured. Nobody's in physical control watching guard over them.
Who had access to that area?
Troopers in our office.
Meaning you, obviously.
Yes.
Supervisor. Trooper Proctor as well, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Ultimately, given the fact that he was the case officer, sort of in charge, the lead, he would have bagged those items up, been responsible for taking those items, tagging them, getting them stored wherever they needed to be stored and processed, correct?
Notice how Jackson kind of weaved that in. That was very sneaky and very subtle, and I loved it. Since he was the case officer and he was in charge and he was the lead. Like, he's not letting it go because he knows he was the lead investigator. Everybody knows he was the lead investigator. Him and his lackeys are the only ones who refuse to admit he was the lead investigator because of all the crap that he has done. Calling Karen Reed the C word and just saying abhorrent things that no professional should ever say about another human being, period.
Case officer, he could direct other people to perform those tasks for him. The evidence officers in the office log in the evidence, and once it was dried, it was sealed up, bagged, and put into storage. As far as who actually performed those tasks, I do not know.
Well, yesterday, Your Honor, may I approach courts, right? There's a couple of evidence.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
This is not a vision contest. I'll bring these up to you in just a second, but just for familiarity's sake, do you recognize these two bags as bags that you brought to court with you yesterday?
They look familiar, yes.
Okay. This one has a 437 on it on my right. The one on my left has a 438 on it. May I approach briefly?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you to open those. Don't worry about gloving up at this point. The bag on your left, which one is that? 437 or 438?
The bag on my left is 437.
437. Okay. And you indicated that those items were bagged after the clothing was dried and then ultimately processed in, logged in, correct?
Once the items dried, they were bagged and logged in, waiting process, yes.
But you didn't personally do that.
No, I did not, no.
Matter of fact, looking at the bag on your right, what's been marked as Exhibit 430, help me? 438, thank you. That one has some writing on it, correct?
Yes, it has a lot of handwriting on it, yes.
And that, whose handwriting is that?
I don't know.
You've seen Trooper Proctor's handwriting 1,000 times, I guess, correct?
Not 1,000 times, but
Does it look like his writing?
it says Trooper Proctor on it, but other than that, I do not know what Trooper Proctor's handwriting looks like.
All right. It indicates that Trooper Proctor is the one that bagged that item or those items up, correct?
Yes, this bag indicates that the item was collected by Trooper Proctor on 129.
Right.
This is important. Why is it important? Because what we did not have in trial number 1 that we will have for trial number 2 is a document from the Massachusetts State Police stating that Trooper Proctor was fired basically for conduct unbecoming a law enforcement officer and in his capacity as the lead investigator in the Karen Reed case, looking into the death of Officer John O'Keefe. So in this portion of the trial, because Yuri is trying to downplay Proctor's involvement by just calling him, he was just a case officer, Jackson is trying to show, no, he was not just a case officer. He was the lead. He's collecting evidence himself, bagging it up, making sure it's all proper. And Yuri, of course, he's trying to evade. He's looking like, listen, I don't know nothing. I don't see nothing. I don't hear nothing. These police officers, they're worse than mafiosos. I swear to you. It's the typical government trick, you know? There's just so many people involved and they just point the finger. It's that classic Spider-Man meme. You know, they all point the finger at each other. It was him. And no, it was not me. It was him. Or it was him. And they go, no, it wasn't. It was me. It was not him. It was not me. It was him. It was him. No, it was him. And that's what Yuri is doing here. It's like, oh, Trooper Proctor? No, he didn't have an involvement. He was just a case officer. Just same with me. I don't know anything. I don't know nothing. And then by the time you're done questioning all of them, it's like, we learned nothing because every single one is like, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. It's exhausting, but this is what you have to do as a criminal defense practitioner when you deal with witnesses that are unwilling to cooperate, that are unwilling to answer questions directly, who are not willing to tell the truth. You have to dissect, break it down. Okay, let's look at the bag. What does it say? It says Trooper Proctor. You know his handwriting? You've seen it 1,000 times. Well, not 1,000 times, but you have seen it before. Well, sure, I've seen it before. Does it look like his? Well, it just, you're going in circles.
And it says Brockton, correct?
Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, yes.
That was, you just took the question out of my mouth. That's where Good Samaritan Hospital is, correct?
That's correct.
And there's a tag or a printed label, looks like a label maker of some sort, that is on that physical bag, correct?
Yes.
Before we get to that, what's the description on that bag in handwriting?
I'm sorry, can you be specific as to description of what, or?
Where it says description of items.
Description of enclosed evidence?
Correct.
It says 1 orange t-shirt, 1 gray long sleeve shirt.
Okay. So, may I approach you on it?
Yes.
And before I do that, just so I close this loop, what's the description on the bag to your left, the one that looks like it's less sprinkled?
Number 437?
Yes. If you would read the same clothing description.
The description of enclosed evidence states sweatshirt with recovered items inside container.
Okay. May I approach now?
Yes.
Thank you. Yesterday when you keep my voice up. Yesterday, when you opened these two bags, this one, 437, has the gray sweatshirt in it. 438 has the orange T-shirt in it now, correct?
That's what was in the bag, yes.
All right. However, the bag indicates at one point, this bag, 438, the physical bag I'm holding in my left hand, had both the sweatshirt and the T-shirt together, correct?
That's what the description is. I do not know if that was in case or in fact the case.
The reason you don't know is because you're not the one the bag Trooper Proctor did, correct?
The reason I don't know is I wasn't present during the separation of those items, and I did not observe it taking place, nor was I made aware of how the items were separated or when.
You are aware, however, that tag that's on the label maker looking tag, the white tag that's on that bag indicates that indicates a date of February 4th, correct?
You'd have to bring that back up. I'm
sorry.
I didn't take note of that.
My fault. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just direct your attention to the tag and the date associated with that tag.
The label maker tag does have the date February 4th, 2022 on bag number exhibit 438.
May I approach?
Yes.
So 5 days after, maybe they were drying still. I remember this testimony. It's been a while. That's why we're redoing it now, to get a refresher.
That's obviously 6 days after
6 days.
the item was actually recovered on the 29th, correct?
Yes, it is.
So that indicates, at least based on that tag, that that item was not booked into evidence and processed until 6 days after it was actually recovered on the floor at Good Samaritan Hospital. Is that right?
The date indicates February 4th, 2022.
Right. And that date would be indicative, in your experience, of the date that it's moved into processing by some other folks, the evidence sergeants or whomever, or the evidence officers, rather, or whomever, correct?
I can't speak to their procedures as far as when they print the date. That date could be when they printed the label, but the bag might have been
What?
tagged otherwise. I do not know that.
But there's no other tag on that bag that suggests an earlier date, correct?
There's just that one tag from the label maker.
Yeah.
My question to you, if you
Oh,
know,
my God.
sir, and you may not know, is what was happening to these items between January 29th, after you lost sight of them that night on the butcher paper, and February 4th, when that tag indicates that they were first processed?
To the best of my knowledge, those items were drying on the butcher paper.
For 6 days?
If that's what the label maker says, yes, for 6 days. They were soaking wet.
And those would have been certainly accessible to and in the possession of the lead case officer in the case, was Trooper Proctor, right?
Yes, if Trooper Proctor needed to review those items, he would have access to those items. Absolutely.
And you're also aware that the first actual log of any chain of custody for those items is March 14th, when they were finally submitted 6 weeks later to the crime lab.
That is not true. The first actual log of those items is when we collected them from the hospital.
Where's the log? I'm talking about the physical log, like sign in, sign out log. Where's the log?
It's documented in the reports saying that we collected them.
I know that there's a report. Anybody can write a report, right? I can write a report. Doesn't mean anything.
Objection.
I'm asking for a log.
Objection.
So the objection sustained.
Obviously, when items move in and out of people's custody in an official capacity for the Massachusetts State Police, there's a log of that.
That's right.
Correct?
It's documented.
Should
Yes.
be.
Or at least it should be. Correct?
It's documented.
Where's the log of these items before March 14th?
It's documented in the report.
There is no log, is there, Sergeant?
Oh.
I do not know.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I want to talk a little bit about.
Wow. What a doozy. Folks, I wanted to thank you all for joining me for part 2 of Yuri Bukhenik's cross-examination testimony in Karen Reed's first trial last year in June of 2024. And I will see you all for part 3 in the next video. Bye, everybody.